Back again, chapter 19. Almost done. I got the notes right here in front of me, so I'm going to keep looking up at it every now and then. But we are still late adulthood, which is 60, 65, right, to 125. And we've done the physical, then the cognitive, and now we're going to do the socio-emotional. And the socio-emotional is, of course, relationship stuff, personality stuff. So we start with Erikson. Last time we see Erikson, we're finally getting done with Erikson. Erikson, something versus something. We've got integrity versus despair. This is the stage, in life where people look back over their experiences, look back over their life and do a review. And Erikson says they're either going to be satisfied with what they're seeing or dissatisfied. And it doesn't necessarily mean that their life was good or bad. It's about their perception of it. You may notice that a lot of your older family members talk a lot about their memories from their life when they were younger. Maybe it's about your other relatives or about what they experienced when they were kids. There's a lot of stories from their life. That is a completely and totally developmentally normal, appropriate thing to be doing that is universal. And Erikson thought that that was about a life review. They also can experience a change in perception of the things that they thought of for their whole life about their past experiences. I remember my stepfather talking about how his dad, he'd always said his dad was mean, his dad was so strict, all this kind of stuff. But when he was older, I remember him saying, I think differently about my dad. Maybe he wasn't so bad. Maybe he wasn't so hard. Maybe he had his own issues. And that's just not a perspective he ever had before. It was always, my dad was mean, my dad was tough. So a lot of times you go through life, you see that it's not as easy, and that you've made decisions maybe that aren't the best, or things have happened that maybe could have gone differently. And you start to understand the people in your life who were before you that maybe you judged harshly. So you just have a different perspective after so many life experiences. So he says that if you are satisfied with your life, and it doesn't mean it was necessarily great, but that you're satisfied with it, then you will have a sense of integrity. Now, integrity, a lot of times we're thinking means you're doing what you say you're going to do. You hold to your own standards, but this is a little different here. This is about being satisfied with how things went. If you're unhappy with how things went, then you're going to be bitter and grumpy, and despair is probably a really good word for that. What that would be like. You're at the end, you can't do it again, and you feel like you had a raw deal, or you screwed it up, or just a lot of regret. I mean, you may have regret now of not doing better in high school, or of some of the decisions you've made, even at only 22. But imagine multiply that by about 4 times the bad decision possibilities and things that didn't go maybe as you wish they would have. And you can see where someone could be very miserable. So that was the integrity versus despair part with Erikson. Some other socio-emotional things that kind of came off of Erikson's idea is identity. And that, I know we talked about identity in adolescence. I'm having to hold the phone again. I know we talked about identity in adolescence, but we talked about middle adulthood too. And now we're talking about late adulthood, because it continues to be revised from all the changes in a person's life. The loss of roles, the loss of functioning, the changes in their health, and these things make them have to reevaluate what they base their sense of self on. They might right now say, well, at least I'm healthy, or at least I can take care of myself. I'm going to try to prop this up. When they're no longer working, they're in retirement, whatever. So they've lost that role of their employee role, so that they may then say, well, at least I can take care of myself. I can wipe my own butt. That's what I've heard a lot of men say. I can take care of myself. But what happens when they can't take care of themselves anymore and they're still alive? They've got to reevaluate. So there's a lot of challenges to older people's identity. This is what your grandparents are going through. Maybe some of your parents, and you just aren't even aware of it, right? Because you think you've been into your own life, which is normal. So a lot of changes happening. Another topic just seems to jump topics all of a sudden is how should we age? Society has different opinions about how you should go through late life and how you should be old. The activity theory believes that you need to be busy. So if you have, like my grandma, she's 95, and even late into her 80s, she was very active. She volunteered here and there. She was a, active member of her church and had some leadership positions and things like this. And everybody used to say, that's why grandma stays so young. That's why she's so healthy, is she keeps busy. She keeps active and participating in things. So that's the activity theory, that the best way to age is to keep staying in life, stay involved, be and do. But then there's the opposite theory some people have. Some people believe that you should just cut back. And that's where retirement comes in, right? Just slow down. Don't do so much. Don't bother yourself with all these things, Grandma. You just take care of you. That's the best way to go through late life. So that's a disengagement theory. We even have celebrations for people who do that, retirement parties. Then you have the middle of the road, right? The selective optimization with compensation theory. And what that means is, so they continue to do some of the things that they used to do, that they used to like to do, or part of their career, profession, or whatever. They don't do as much of it. So that's where the selective comes in. They only do certain parts of it. They may have to practice more to optimize their ability to do it. So they may have to adjust and practice a little bit more, adjust how they do it. And then compensate. They may have to use different equipment. Like my mom loves to work outside with flowers, but she's a lot more pain now than she used to, and she can't get around as easily, up and down, up and down, up and down on her hands and knees, crawling around like she used to. So maybe she uses a little bench that she sits on and carries it with her. Maybe she has a small flower bed instead of a giant one. So that would be like, she still does flowers, but she picks only certain ones. She has to use some different tools to help her do the activities. So that's the compensation. And maybe she can only do it a couple hours a day, or maybe an hour a day, or a short period of time during the day. And that could be the optimization. So it's like you still do some things, but not as much, and you have to make some changes. I think they gave you an example of a musician who still plays, but doesn't play as many pieces. And when the fast parts come up, the whole piece is slowed down so that the fast parts still sound fast in comparison to the rest of it. A video I used to show in class was the gymnast. She was interesting. Okay. All right. All right. Self-esteem. Yes, I know. We talked about it in adolescence, and it's back up again. It came up in middle age too. It's back into this age. Now, this one kind of gives you an overall lifespan approach to it. Adults. Because the notes are talking about how it's high in the 20s and then levels off in 30s and 40s. It goes up again in the 50s and 60s. You've got mastery of the world, right? You're in command. You know a lot. You're probably the boss of your job. So there's a lot of, what's the word? Competency. Yeah, that's it. So you feel pretty good. But then it can decrease in the 70s and 80s. So your grandparents and great-grandparents might be dealing with some self-esteem issues, which is probably something that you didn't think about. But again, all these changes happening to them with their friends and family and their abilities and losses, it can affect how they see themselves. And where people late in life live, the majority of them, 2/3, live in the community. So they're out there somewhere, maybe with their family, maybe by themselves, maybe with a spouse, maybe with their sibling, but they are out there. And the majority of them are out there. We usually think of people in late life living in nursing homes or facilities, but the majority of people in late life are in the early ages. They're in that 60, 65, 70, 75. And so they live on their own. Majority of people who do live on their own are widowed. They prefer to be independent, as you do. And I mean, you're in at the other end of the spectrum. So you're waiting to get out and wanting to go live on your own and have that independence. Well, these people have had it for 60, 70 years. They've had it forever. Their whole life, it seems, because believe me, living at home is a very short period of time. So they're used to doing things when they want, how they want, what time of day, and what order. They've been in command of their life. So to all of a sudden assume that they don't need that and don't want that is ridiculous. So it's very, very important to give them as much control over their life as possible. If grandma or grandpa's living with you, give them as much say over when they eat, when they bathe, what they watch, their habits, their daily life. Same thing if you work with any kind of older population and any kind of living arrangement. Give them as much control over life as possible. Obviously, there's areas where they can't. The timing of things sometimes because you have so many people to work with, but anywhere you can, it's very important. Let them keep control. They may have a loss of what's called self-efficacy. That's the belief that you can do something. So they may start getting down on themselves and feel like they're not very competent and they can't do much for themselves. And that's an attitude that we want to try to prevent as much as possible. Because it actually has more of an impact on their health and their mental state. So we don't want to, cause them more problems. Loss of self-efficacy and control is a stronger prediction, I'm reading it right here, of being frail, depressed, and dependent. Okay, so another big thing I want you to make sure you know is how important friends are. It's extremely important for people in late life to have friends. It's so important that they'll often count people as friends who normally wouldn't be counted as their friends at other times in their life. Maybe it's the person who delivers their mail, the grocery checkout person, they'll introduce them as their friend. It's very important for them to have and maintain and keep up with their friends. What happens a lot of times is grandma can't take care of herself anymore. And the adult children still have responsibilities, jobs, their own kids take care of. They can't move back to take care of mom. So what do? They move mom with her. They move mom in with the adult children. And she leaves all her friends. And you think, you're busy in your life. Friends don't mean very much. But they're very important to people in late life. So you need to do whatever you can to help them keep up with those friends that they have. It's very, very important. And they get some more stats that go with that. Older women are more depressed if they don't have a best friend. They need a BFF. But it's very important for them to have social support. That can come from family also. But again, it goes along with disease and dependency and depression. It's just very important. The aging couple, usually this is a happy time in life. Women are usually happier if they're married than men, which is funny. They're usually happier in the marriage than the men are. Of course, intimacy versus sexual prowess. And intimacy, remember, is sharing personal information and being close to someone. They will lose their spouse. And it's statistically harder on a man to lose a spouse than a wife. And I would normally ask you why, but, I got to just tell you why. Some guesses. Sorry, it's nighttime. Some guesses as to why it's harder on males is because it's not expected. It's not expected for a guy to lose his wife. It's not typical. Men die before women generally, so that's what he's expecting. So if she goes before him, it's kind of like out of timing. Also, he may not have a lot of other friends in that same situation because it's not as typical. Also, he doesn't typically have a lot of friends, so he doesn't have as much social support as the woman does when her husband dies. And remember how women are more religious. That's helpful. So, I often have students say, well, it's because the men are used to women taking care of them, and women are taking care of themselves. Maybe. But it's just harder on the men than the women. Ethnicity and gender, being an older minority, is more difficult than being an older majority in our country. Older minorities often have lived a life of less education, less income, poorer healthcare, poorer housing, and so their late life is usually shorter and it's sicker, not as well. Sometimes they don't even make it until Medicaid kicks in, and when Medicaid would kick in, they'd have better insurance than they've had in their whole life. Now, I'm hoping that this is a cohort thing, and when your generation gets to late life, we won't have the same disparities. But that's the way it is right now for people in late life. They grew up at a different time, under different conditions, lots of inequalities, and they're paying the price of that lifetime of inequality. So families and churches are extremely important to minority late life people. Women, because that goes into with minorities and gender, women have the higher rate of poverty than men. Think about it for this population. They've outlived the men, so they're living longer than the men. They didn't work. A lot of them didn't have a steady career where they earned a lot of money. They were dependent on the husband's money. So they live longer and they're poorer. Bad combination. There's some developmentalist in your book says number one concern for women should be economic security. That should be their number one thing, because we're just going to live longer and we don't make as much money. Stats also say 25% of women who are working today will be poor in late life. So economics is a big deal for women. Alrighty. That's what we have. That's it. 16 minutes. Chapter 19. It's usually much more interesting than this. We get to talk. Oh well. Sorry. Bye.